mode.
A very good Thursday. That's Raceland users and prospective users. Happy to get together and looking forward to the weekend in Toronto. Woodbine Mile Day has become really the biggest first post-Saratoga and post-Del Mar weekend the last several years, really tied back to the rise of Wise Dan and then continued by Tepin's presence and another nice field of 9. And interestingly, the way the schedule lies, the mile starts off the All-State Pick 4. We're going to look at those races. Happy to have Dan Tordjman, of course, and Ellis Starr with us to do it. And say, first of all, good evening, Dan.
Hey, Steve. How's it going? Ellis, how are you? It is good to be back. I've been off these webinars for most of the summer, and it sounds like you guys have come across some decent prices throughout the summer, and so hopefully we can keep those good vibes going, and maybe I can contribute a little bit tonight. But excited to be back for another one of these Stats Racelands webinars. It's a fun card on Saturday at Woodbine.
Absolutely, and given some of the weather woes up and down the eastern seaboard, ideally Toronto going to be out of harm's way. The action we'll talk about includes not just the mile, of course, but the Northern Dancer, which is actually in some ways maybe the most intriguing of race on the card. You've also got opportunity to talk about the Canadian, kind of a small field, maybe a place for the Pick 4 to tiptoe through, and the Bold Venture, the sprint that features the incredible Pink Lloyd. And we'll have a lot of fun tonight. Ellis?
Good afternoon. Good evening, everybody. For the people on the West Coast, good afternoon. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I've always been a all-weather fan ever since Keeneland and the California tracks went to all-weather, and then Woodbine stuck with it, of course, and changed to the Tapeta surface. And been doing a free pick for the Woodbine site now. It's my second year every day, so it gives me a chance to look at the turf races, the dirt races, and of course I try and pick stakes when they're available. So it's going to be fun watching Pink Lloyd. It's tough, a horse like that. What do you want to do? We'll talk about him some more, but it's a great sequence. 4 stakes races, 3 on the turf, 1 on the all-weather, and I'm really looking forward to going over with everybody tonight.
Well, before we dive in, and we will start with the Woodbine Mile, and I'll mention too to people, conversation with Andy Serling today on the radio. There is Saturday, there is another cross-country Pick 4 that ties in the 8th and 9th in New York with the 8th and 9th at Woodbine. And actually, I take that back, the 8th and the 9th. So another fun multi-race, multi-track wager on Saturday. And those races will be on, the Woodbine action will be on as part of the Belmont Live show. Before we dive into action, let's hit a couple of notes. And the current promotion, we always alert everybody. If you've not been a Stats Racelands user yet, you'll get a free month by just sending a note to statsfeedback@equibase.com. And this is good today and tomorrow through the evening through up to midnight tomorrow. So if you're going to subscribe, basically get a free month by letting everybody at Stats know. Statsfeedback@equibase.com. And we'll be together again in just 3 weeks as we start to really get into the Breeders' Cup lead up and the Belmont Super Saturday card on October 6th. So we'll be together again on the 4th. There's also, of course, the Keeneland Fall Stars weekend that coincides. So, and one of the biggest weekends really of the year, our next opportunity to handicap together and go over races using the features in Stats Racelands. And speaking of features in Stats Racelands, Ellis, what's new on the platform?
Well, I know some people are new to these webinars, and some people have been, come and go, and you can always catch them on replay. So there's a couple features. But before I forget, you reminded me of something, because I want everybody to know that is a Stats Racelands user, or if you are thinking of taking advantage of the trial, that pick 4 is included every time it's available. And you can see on my screen here that hopefully everybody can see, it's called Special. And this Special makes it easy for you to get those races in the cross-country pick 4. As Steve said, the Rico Woodbine Mile. The second race is a claiming race at Belmont. It says right there, the third race is the Canadian, and the fourth is the race at Belmont. So you don't have to go back and forth if you just want to handicap that great cross-country pick 4. And those kinds of bets, when they have them, are included in Stats Racelands under the track labeled Special. So that's something cool. But you didn't even know that, Steve. That's new to you, because I just learned it today.
Very cool. I love it.
Yeah. Well, it's a great bet. Pick 3s, pick 4s, just fantastic. So a couple things that people may have not seen since they've been on, and the features we've added, a couple of them actually. One, and I'm just going to use, I will actually use the Rico for a second, but I'm going to go to the Woodbine, and we'll come back to the Rico, but I'm going to go to the Rico Woodbine Mile and click on True Odds. For those that don't know, again, this is customer request. We always try and adhere to some of the things our customers ask for, and for those that have messed around with the settings, these are the default settings for the type of race. So, for example, this is a turf route, but if you mess around with some of the weights and you make some changes like this, for example, I'm moving jockey and pace, and maybe I'm moving the track and applying it, it's going to change the win probability. It makes a new set. Set is now called user modified. Of course, you can save your own, but this is on the fly. If you say, oh, I don't like what I did, I don't like that, or I just want to remind myself what the default, we now have a default set button, which will reset everything back to those settings. So it's back to what the program has as a turf route. And there are about 15 different types of races: fast, slow, route, sprint, dirt, and turf, etc. One of the other features we'll get into actually is in angles. And this is also something we added at the request of a lot of our customers. For those that work with the program, when you go into individual research, you have the ability to see the details of all the races the statistic is for. But now we have that in angles. So I'm going to find one here. I believe I have one here. This is an angle this is more for notification purposes, but this is the Bold Venture. This is a race that was a key race. And now when I go and look at that angle, just 1 second, it's going to come up here. I could have done it from the home screen, but I did it from the PP page instead. So let me switch to this horse real quick. And there's that angle, and it takes me to the back test page, so I can see the angle summary and how it did. Of course, this one, again, we're talking about, I use this for notifications, so I have to go looking for key races. But it tells me all this, and then I can set it for the last 2 weeks to make it a smaller number. And when I click on details, it will now bring up those races. Of course, I picked a bad one because this one has thousands of races. But it will show the details of the angle when it comes up. So that's really the two things I wanted to show, and particularly the issue with telling people that they can get the special pick 4 as well. And we'll get into the races now.
Excellent. Well, let's start it out. And Dan, your approach to this group in the Woodbine Mile, we got a little bit of everything. We got a filly, we got Euros, we've got some horses that may be peaking at the right time. We've got horses coming back to turf after some dirt tries. Where are you going?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting field too. Pretty compact field. I mean, I think you could more or less identify the key players at a brief glance. Let's start with Lord Glitters, the 6 here, trained by David O'Meara, who most people know won this race in 2015 with Mondi Ellis, also owned by same owners, Jeff and Sandra Turnbull. And the interesting thing is they actually prepped this horse sort of in a similar way to Mondy Elise. Lord Glitters comes out of the same Group 3 at York that propelled Mondy Elise to the win in the Woodbine Mile in 2015. But Lord Glitters is also twice Group 1 placed, and I think at least comes in based on what I can remember of Mondy Elise, a bit more accomplished than he was. And so watching replays, and I was able to pull up a couple of them for Lord Glitters, he's always kind of taken way back and looks like he's a lot to handle. He throws his head up in the air and he has to be settled down early. And then he usually just kind of explodes late. And it's one of those things where, watching the replays, like, I'm kind of a little anxious about using him because if there is a good amount of speed early, which I'm not sure there will be, I could see him sort of eager to kind of keep up with the rest, and he may be a bit to handle. But apart from that, again, I as I mentioned, the incredible turn of foot that I saw in both the Sussex and Queen Anne stakes. You got that 122 right there circled for the Equibase speed figure, which indicates the highest speed figure on the page here for any horse, and he posted 2 of them. So he's one that I'm going to look at for all the reasons I just mentioned, plus the connection to David O'Meara and the prior success in this race. That's something that's got to make you feel good. Now, as far as the sort of locally, or at least the American or the North American based horses, the 3, Delta Prince is one that kind of stands out. If you saw the 4-star Dave, you probably remember Voodoo Song going to the lead and unexpectedly being sort of loose on the lead, which, when you have a horse of that caliber loose on the lead, it's going to be hard to run him down. And so here's the chart there from that race. You see Yoshida down there as well. Really, really competitive field, but we thought Heart to Heart would go with Voodoo Song in that race, and he didn't. Voodoo Song was loose on the lead, and as you could tell, of all the horses that made up ground late, Delta Prince did the best job of that. I think Delta Prince has really found himself after being away for nearly a year. He beat a nice field at Woodbine 2 races back in the King Edward. And so, that there's form over the course. And I think, coming out of that competition, that level of competition at Saratoga against these, I think he should be well positioned to run a pretty nice race. And the last one I would look at in terms of sort of major contenders is the 2. You mentioned the filly La Sardane, trained by Neil Drysdale, who has actually won this race more than anyone else. One of those winners was a Team Valor horse named To Be Crux, who won. Can't remember the exact year. You guys remember the year? But this is also Team Valor. And so, here's one who looks interesting, as you can see by looking at the past few races. I mean, she's generally on the lead. You could probably put a line through that last race over the wet turf there. She didn't really have any excuses in that race. Was pestered mildly by Boreal Spirit and just sort of folded late. I'd give credit to Mr. Haverkamp, who in that race had a ton of traffic, got through, and then won sort of going away. But if you look at La Sardane over the firm going at Churchill and Belmont, she went wire to wire in the Perfect Sting. And Ellis, we can look at the true odds and the pace projector here. I think any way you slice this race, try to figure out how this might unfold from a pace perspective, you got to imagine La Sardane is going to be either completely loose on the lead or fairly loose and facing some token pressure. And so if you believe that the surface last out is what did her in, I think you got to look for an improved effort here, because she should have things her way from a pace perspective. So I think you got to use her, and I think she's one that's interesting, and you're going to get a decent enough price there. You see 15-1, the adjusted true odds, so the odds that at this stage that Stats Race Lens thinks would be fair odds would be 13-1, and I wouldn't be surprised if she took a little more play than that. I do want to show one other thing, going back to the PPs and the 9-horse Stormy Antarctic. Just a little, just to show off one of the tools here that you could use on Stats Race Lens. You look at the trainer once we Here we go. The trainer, Ed Walker, younger guy. Haven't seen him ship many in. And he's obviously based overseas. And so if you're wondering who is Ed Walker and why does he have a horse in this race, one of the cool things you can do is kind of just take a look at who he shipped in the past and what kind of luck he's had. So you could go to shippers, and then Ellis here is setting up all the variables, and you can pull up and see here that he's had a couple come in, and some of these names you may even recognize. 0 for 3 with the 3 that are listed. If you click all shippers as well, and we could do foreign shippers or all shippers, there were a couple. He actually brought Glorious Empire over as well, and tried him, I think 6.5 over the all weather, and didn't win first time over here. So you can kind of play with these searches a little bit and expand it if you look at all shippers. But ultimately, I think what I'm just trying to demonstrate there is that if you look at, I talked about David O'Meara coming in, shipping horses in, and winning a race like this in the past. Obviously, you have a lot more confidence when you see something like that, as opposed to a younger trainer who's had a couple come in and who hasn't yet quite broken through. So that being said, Stormy Antarctic is sort of a mystery to me. I don't know. Sometimes these horses just sort of still just kind of jump up and they're able to run well in a spot like this. So I know we had a little issue there trying to hop back and forth in the searches. Thanks for bearing with me, Ellis.
I'm sorry about that. It really
no worries.
I didn't want people to sit there watching the screen. It's usually extremely fast. Something about making that one change from foreign shippers to all shippers wasn't working. So I hope you don't mind. We just skipped it.
Yeah, no, totally. But yeah, I think we sort of demonstrated, even though it's sort of a small sample, that you can really, especially if you see these trainers, whether it be shipping in or trainers from a different circuit that you don't recognize when you're handicapping a race, wherever you might be handicapping it, you can kind of see how those trainers do. You can search really by, how they do within a certain circuit, how they do at a particular track, or in this case, how they do when they ship horses in.
And all three of those were in the money though, which is a good sign.
Right. So
live horses.
So what do you think, Ellis? You've I think I know who you like
So
based on the
I'm going to go basically, and we're both on the same horse. I tweeted that earlier today that we both like Lord Glitters, and you're talking about the statistics, and this was really interesting for me because this is going to get to what you talked about, which you might not know, which you're going to know now. And so the first thing I thought of, first of all, it's a number of things. All the European races are out there, so I looked at them on Google. But I know some of these horses. I know Lightning Spear is that was a Grade 1 race, the Sussex Group 1, and Lord Glitters ran fine. Beaten the Neck to Beat the Bank. Beat the Bank is a multiple Group 1 winner. That was his second. And of course, Accidental Agent, that's for all of us that are watching Royal Ascot in June. That was just a huge effort as well. So he's getting beaten by some really good horses and big figures. But I also, again, for looking for just information on the trainer, two things. I'll go back and forth here. So first, David O'Meara, and I have this already set up, so this is going to be easier to get it. I have just a trainer stat. I have a lot here. Just the last 5 years, because I know he doesn't ship in much. So David O'Meara in the last 5 years, he only had 2 horses, and one of them is Mondialiste. So just in case, Dan, if this ever comes up again, you could do this real quick, just set up for past 5 years and leave everything else off. For foreign trainers, you might even do shippers. And there's Mondialiste. Well, now I want to look at both horses' PPs. I go to this view all horses' PPs, and there's the lifetime. So it reminds me, because I wouldn't have remembered, and I'm glad you did, but he prepped in York and the Strensel Stakes. He won it by a neck, came here and just came from way, way back, 14 lengths back to win the Woodbine Mile, then second to the Breeders' Cup to Tepin. The next year, shipped in from York and won the Arlington Million. That's him. Now, the other interesting thing is when I go down to the other horse, which is Suedois, who I loved last year in the Shadwell. And Suedois came in from Ireland, and won the Shadwell Mile under Danny Hood Open. Then not bad, beating a head and a neck and a length in the Breeders' Cup Mile also. Now, what's really interesting is because I remember looking at the TP lines of Lord Glitters and I watched the race, and I remember hearing Sway Joie getting called, and I was looking for it, and there it is. So Lord Glitters beat Sway Joie by a nose for second in the Summer Mile Group 2. So I assume Sway Joie is still trained by David O'Meara. They ran second and third. So this is a really quality horse, and the guy doesn't mess around when he comes to the U.S. Again, winning the Shadwell and winning the Woodbine Mile. It's all good stuff. Jamie Spencer gets back on, and the last two times he rode him were in those big races at Ascot, beating the half, beating the neck. So that's not a problem, and those figures. So he's my top pick as well. And opening at 4-1, I'm pretty excited about it. Now, I'm going to get to Delta Prince, but my second wing contender is going to be Good Samaritan. And I'm really pleased to see this nice price because that'll make the exactas wonderful here. The great thing about Racelands is I have my PP set to lifetime. And so those who read the stories know what Belmont says. You know he ran on turf. I remember he ran on turf. The first 6 starts of his career were on turf. Not only that, but he won around 2 turns at Saratoga first time out, beat Ticonderoga, who won a stake, then came back and won the summer stake at Woodbine at this mile trip on this weekend. The summer stakes were on Sunday this year. And then third in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. Those were all without blinkers, and they were all with Rosario. And then, if you remember, they tried him on dirt at Jim Dandy. He ran phenomenally well, and then he ran okay, second in the Clark. He won the New Orleans this year on dirt, then these 3 duds in a row. So what's Mott doing? He's moving back to turf. He's taking the blinkers off. Well, that shows me that any of these races are representative. Now, he didn't have huge speed figures because he was a 2-year-old and a young 3-year-old at the time, but we already know what he can do. He can run a 116. And so comparing him to the 122 of Lord Glitters, Good Samaritan has a big shot here. Another interesting thing was, this is going to be a very small sample, but I personally hate it. I'd love to hear what both of you have to say. I really hate it when the trainer does an experiment by taking blinkers off in a stakes race. It's just the stupidest thing in the world for me, but I'm not going to question some people. So with Mott, I went to look, because I think for him, it's got to be, I have it here, blinkers off for a stake. It's got to be something significant. Now, Mott's done it 4 times in 5 years, all the stakes wins in 5 years. And I see one winner, and I'm going to remind myself what it was just to see if it's similar to this. Not exactly, but it's kind of an example. The horse was just running lousy, takes blinkers off, happens to put Rosario on, which is what's happening here, and bada bing, bada bang, bada boom, a great 2 win. So Good Samaritan is a fit for me because it's one of those questions. Does he have prior form that would be good enough to run well? He does. Is there a problem with the surface? No. Can I make an excuse? Not really, but with the blinkers off, I like him. And then Delta Prince, who you mentioned, Dan, would be my third win contender here. There's not much to add to what you said. He's truly a miler. He's got 6 races a mile on the grass, 4 wins and 2 seconds. And the last 2 at Castellano, off a layoff from September to June, came back and won a grade 2 off a layoff. It's phenomenal. Didn't bounce at all. Just getting beat a neck in that race in which we just saw and controlled the pace as we saw and was getting. And I think it was a great move on the part of Jimmy Jerkins. I would imagine, and Steve, you can tell me if maybe my guess is right, that he wanted to run the horse in the Rico, and he said, well, I'm going to get it over, put him a race at Woodbine, just get him used to it. He won. He was the favorite that day. And so not only that, now he has experience at Woodbine because this is a unique mile. This is a 1-turn mile. For those who see the course, it's not a 2-turn mile. It's almost a sprint. So I think it's pretty good that he has it. So those are my 3. Mr. Haverkamp, just to mention, so, we'll talk about horses we didn't mention. Certainly tremendous turn of foot last time out. Beat Banish, who's also in the race. But that 104, 107 are not going to stack up, even on an improving pattern for me, to the 116 to 120 that we're seeing with the top 3 contenders. Stormy Antarctic, I might use him in the exotic. He doesn't have the same kick, in my opinion, that the other ones do. But he's been running well in Group 1, Group 2. Gerald Mossey's coming over, who's never ridden him before. So I'm not as excited as I am with Spencer riding Lord Glitters, who's ridden him before. And Oscar Performance, again, of course, we're going to mention, he's 7-2. And I think it makes the race bettable because I'm going to take a stand against him. I know he's come back to work okay since he got pulled up at the million, but that's a huge red flag for me. And he certainly could run well. His best races of 118s could do it, but I'm going to leave him off. So in the Woodbine Mile, my picks are going to be Lord Glitters, Good Samaritan, and Delta Prince. And I'm going to certainly bet Lord Glitters to win. And I'm going to bet Good Samaritan to win the place because I think I can't miss 10-1 on a my horse when he's doing that. So, Steve, feel free to comment on anything I said, a couple things I threw at you, and what do you think?
Well, I think you've all hit both hit on on the key elements, and absolutely Lord Glitters. You start your conversation there. I think one thing that we should look at and discuss is the pace, and let's look at that pace projector and understand that there's really not much of a pace signed on here. And from that standpoint, it certainly doesn't help Good Samaritan. I happen to agree with a lot of the points about his value in here, getting him back on grass. I understand why they had such a protracted attempt to get him a Grade 1 win on the dirt. Being by Harlan's Holiday, he's going to get a chance to stand stud, and having turf stake wins and dirt stake wins has become more and more fashionable. So I understand it. I think there's every reason to like him as a value play. The horse, though, that we haven't talked about, that just has been kind of touched on, is Mr. Haverkamp. And this race, I think back, 2-3 years to Tower of Texas and Eureka da Silva, getting him in behind Tepin at a huge price that day in the 20-25-1 range. I think that you can look at horses that are going to be back right behind the pace, and Mr. Haverkamp fits that, and he certainly can finish. And then Delta Prince. I mean, Delta Prince to me is the obvious horse after you discuss Lord Glitters. I mean, those two are clearly your most likely winners.
I'm going to show Mr. Haverkamp's kick here because I'm going to back it up right here because it was pretty impressive, as you said, that kind of move. He's in the yellow here, the 4, and he's really not going to have room. And then I believe, if I recall correctly, Da Silva doesn't even have to do anything except just give him a little push through the hole, and he just takes off. And so you're right, it does kind of remind me of Tower of Texas in the race. Here's the move right here. He just throws the rein, he's gone.
And let's acknowledge that he's perfect at Woodbine. And granted, those races come against much more restricted company, but I respect Mr. Haverkamp a lot, and I certainly want him on the ticket. If you decide that Good Samaritan is not going to get enough of a pace, to impact this significantly, then Mr. Haverkamp at 6-1, and I think you'll get that. He's the other player. The only other horse I want to talk about is Oscar Performance, and it's hard to know what to expect coming off of the the pull up and van off in Chicago. I'll say this: Brian Lynch would not be bringing him here if he was not convinced that that's an anomaly and you're putting a line through it. And so I will not be surprised if Oscar Performance runs well. You don't come to an international event like this with a horse that you're not sure is 100%. So that's the only thing about him that I'll toss in. The Visadero, again, we get back to the pace scenario, and I just don't think that there's enough pace in here to give the horses that want to make one run the kind of chance they need and the pace setup they need. But it's still it's kind of weird that the sequence starts with this race as opposed to ending with it. But so be it. And let's press forward and get to the ninth, the second leg of this pick four, and the third leg of the cross country pick four, the Canadian. And we'll start with Ellis.
Well, there's an old saying, I'm sure you've heard it. I'm going to kind of tweak it. It's grade one winners win grade one races. This is a grade two. So grade two winners win grade two races, especially for older horses and really for fillies and mares. And there's three grade two or better horses in this race. They are New Money Honey, Nigon's Eclipse, and this one, Starship Jubilee. And Starship Jubilee is incredibly intriguing for me. Starship Jubilee won the Nassau and the Dance Smartly back here in 2017. This year's Nassau winner is Nigon's Eclipse. Then a couple of not bad races, not bad at all. In this race last year at 8-1 was a career best, 113 Equibase speed figure when she stalked the pace, made the lead, ended up third, 3/4 behind Alicia's World and another length behind Kadura in that 7-horse field. And again, only New Money Honey, Nigon's Eclipse. She likes to win, and this is what's so great for me. She's 10 for 22 in her career, 10 for 21 on grass. And this is the kind of horse that gets very streaky. So I just love a pattern like this where she got good. She originally was in claiming races, and then a card picked her up back here at Gulfstream in the winter of 2017. And she reels off 5 straight wins, including the Nassau and Dance Smartly. Then she gets a little bit sour. She runs the Sky Classic, and that's males, of course. And then third in this race, third again, take a couple months off. Then she puts in 2 good races in a row in her 2018 campaign. She wins the Sunshine Millions. She's still eligible for a starter for the Clayton Crown race, or a starter stakes, the Mary Todd, runs second. She gets sour again. Well, then she does the same thing. She comes back to win. When she wins, as evidenced by this 5 in a row, by this 1-2, she holds her form. Now, De Silva, of course, is going to get off, and he's going to ride Halle Bell for Godolphin and Mike Stidham, and I get that. But there's no problem with Luis Contreras here. Solid percentages all the way around. I think he's the third leading jockey at the meeting. And you've got a mare here that just loves to win when she's in the mood, and I think she's in the mood here. So I'm going to make her my top pick. For those that are thinking about that last race, which she basically ran in a starter allowance race is what it is, optional claimer, I think that was just to get her a race. Why wouldn't you run her in that race if she's eligible? She's protected rather than a workout. And I think that was Atard's goal, was to do that. So I don't have an issue. And the last year, again, back to the 113, we'll see how that stacks up with the other horses. Then I'm going to go to Flexibility, who, in my opinion, is a fairly legitimate favorite. She wasn't disgraced at all, stalking, getting the lead against Sister Charlie and 4-Star Crook and Tay. Before that, a big second to Santa Monica, Chad Brown's other horse, a Raving Beauty second, and then the nice 2 wins. She's a up-and-coming 4-year-old. The Dance Smartly, again, she got a race over the track and went on a quarter. Now she's coming back to mile and 1/8, and she's got a mile and 1/8 win. She won the Carotene Stakes for state breds, Ontario breds, last fall. But the pattern is good. I'm willing to ignore the last race. And, of course, we all know about Chad Brown, but I'm not aware. And one of the great things about race funds is it answers questions as you handicap. So I wanted to just remind myself how Chad Brown does with horses that he races at Woodbine. And, of course, we know that she ran at Woodbine, but I have this already. We know that Brown's overall stats are fantastic, 24%, 62 in Surf Route Stakes. But I have one which is at track the last 2 years. And we'll include turf and all weather, but it won't matter. And Brown's got 5 winners at Woodbine the last couple of years, including Santa Monica, we just mentioned, including this filly, but also ran into Bateria and Alicia's World, who ran second. So there's no question that Chaz is good is here as he is in New York with this filly, and that's fine. I will consider for minors, for second and third, I will consider Daring Duchess, who's coming off just a huge win last time out. I will consider Nigon's Eclipse, who won the Nassau, because she's just really consistent. I love that. Even more seconds than first, but 4 wins in 7 seconds. And I'll consider Halle Bell, even though it's a silver picks. Some people will note that. One of the great things I have set up, people could do, again, for those folks that are new, and either those that have race funds, new people to take advantage of the free month we're offering by sending an email to statsfeedback@equibase.com. I have scratches merged in with my other races, so I can see that she was scratched 1 week ago out of the Kentucky Downplay Turf to run here. So it's a positive sign. I think her best race isn't good enough, 97.104 Equibase figures, but I wouldn't argue. So in the Canadian Stakes, I'm going with Starship Jubilee. My top pick, definitely going to bet her to win and win place. And in flexibility is my other win contender. I'm going to key on those in trifectas. And as part of the pick 4, I'm going to use the other 3, Daring Duchess, Nigon's Eclipse, and Halle Bell in exactly the trifectas. It's really only in second. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think when I looked at this race, the one thing that jumped out to me, I think from a pace perspective for a mile and an eighth race, I thought there was a decent amount of speed. I think as you touched on, Nigon's Eclipse is the speed of the speed. If you look at the pace projector here, it actually has, I think, inflexibility up there as well. And then, you're
Nigon's Eclipse just all by herself here. Oh, no,
yeah.
Actually, it's good. Nigon's Eclipse is the P. So the early speed here is Halle Bell and inflexibility.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see how it shakes out. I mean, I have a hard time imagining Nigon's Eclipse not being, right up with the pace. But either way, I mean, I think there's enough pace. You see, it also has Halle Bell up there with them, and I think you could even get some token pressure from Daring Duchess. Yeah. So, look, those horses might hurt each other a little bit. I'm not saying they're gonna, kind of do a half in 45 flat, but I am saying that I think the pace will be honest. And so I think if there's one horse to me who might benefit from that, I landed on Bletchley. You see the morning line here, 20-1, which I think is a little inflated, considering that if you look at the 2 races at Woodbine, both really, really strong races. The runner-up in the Nassau, which I'd like to take a look at here in a second, and the Dan Smartley, which is also a really nice race considering how far back she was. If we want to pull up the Nassau briefly here, there's no trouble indicators, but let's when we pull this video up, we could just sort of start it on the backstretch as they're sort of about to begin the turn for home. This will take a couple of seconds to heat up, so bear with us. But just want to give you a sense for Bletchley's running style. In both those races, the Nassau, which you're about to see here, and the Dan Smartley, Patrick Husband's Road is not riding today, and really took her so far back and so out of it that she needed a good pace up front to really make an impact. And over here, the pace wasn't terrible. And you can see that's her closing on the outside there. It wasn't necessarily a slow pace, but she was so far back that by the time she made her move, it was just too late. And so, I just thought that the way that race set up, that was sort of her day. And you could take a look at the move here. So obviously, she's well off of them, and she has to make a wide move, and again, just visually, you can see how impressive that move is, considering that the leader here is loose the whole time. You can see they're realizing that they have to start picking it up. The leader's loose, and so no one else is gaining, except for the one horse that you'll see flying. And so, to me, I thought this was visually impressive, and I thought with that sort of effort, with a little more pace today, and going slightly longer. I thought that Bletchley, I say today, Saturday, Bletchley could be dangerous. So that's one that I like at a price. And here you go. You're seeing the move now again there on the outside, owned by Starship Jubilee, who was a short price favorite there. And then almost getting to Egon's Eclipse, but had just enough left since he was alone on the lead there for most of the race. And so that's one. You mentioned that you didn't love Halle Bell. I'm not in love with Halle Bell, but I think she has a sneaky look to her. This is only her third try in graded stakes company, and she hasn't been disgraced in her attempts so far. If you look at the progression, you can just look at the Equibase speed figures going 4 races back to the beginning of the year, 85, 97, 100, 112. I mean, that's a significant improvement each time out. That's definitely what you like to see. And then, it is interesting to me that the leading rider here, Eureka Rosa da Silva, you mentioned a moment ago, does hop off, and takes this mount here. You could also look. I'm just curious to see how many times he's been up for trainer Michael Stidham, and you can just, I don't know if you want to, if you could do a search if you want, but I could also tell you that the result.
I'm sure I have that.
You got
jockey.
Yeah,
somewhere. I can't promise you where it is, but I have a lot. Sorry.
Yeah, you've got a lot of them in there. So it's really, I mean, it is.
I thought I put it at the bottom, but forgive me. I should have had this ready to go. Actually, I can just do this. We can do it quicker this way than
It's probably a shortcut. I thought you were looking for a shortcut there. Yeah, I mean, I was curious again as to how many times he's ridden for him, and I'll let you guess what that number is, but a clue would be that it's not many times.
Again, I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm not queued up. Sorry.
No worries.
I don't want to waste everybody's time with that one.
Yeah, I can.
It definitely wasn't last year. I remember that.
Yeah. So anyhow, so that's one. I mean, again, she just looks sneaky to me. I think she's another one who could sit off of it and make one run and could be dangerous potentially. And then, I don't need to reiterate everything you said about inflexibility. Look, logically on paper, inflexibility is kind of, way ahead of these on class and in the company she's been keeping of late. She's 2 for 3 at Woodbine. The only loss came in the Dan Smartley to Santa Monica, as you mentioned. And that was kind of an oddly run race for her. So as we wait for this page to bump,
so we can keep talking about horses.
I would just say that I would round out my selections here with inflexibility. So Bletchley is your price. Halle Bell is one I would use in exactas. And if you're looking for horses at the bottom of your trifectas, and inflexibility, I think is one that you have to take seriously. So those would be my my top 3. Steve, you had a chance to look at this one?
Inflexibility should not lose. If you're keeping the company line, and you see her losing to stablemates, Arabian Beauty, Santa Monica, and Sister Charlie. If any of them are in this race, they're 2 to 5, and this is her chance for a graded stake win. And considering other places in this sequence, it feels like she is a really strong lean, and I'll be surprised if she gets beat.
Yep. All right. Well, we could, Ellis, if you'd like, I mean, I could just move right along to the Bold Venture, which is the third race in.
Just anybody we left out? Did you feel that New Money Honey is because I talked about it briefly. Dan really didn't, and she is the 5-2 favorite. So I feel that we need to at least talk about whether you agree or not that she might not be a contender, as I feel, and apparently Dan does. What's your take on New Money Honey, Steve?
I don't think she's the same filly at 4 that she was at 3, and it's Chad Brown. I suppose she's a C, and you might want to be defensive with her, but there's every reason to see inflexibility winning this race from a pace and positioning standpoint. Ortiz,
right.
and there's just everything to like about her opportunity in here. And I come back to the company line and Sister Charlie, Raving Beauty, Santa Monica. I mean, these are you talked about grade 1, grade 2. I mean, she's been facing off against arguably 3 of the best half dozen filly and mare turfers in the country, in North America. So I just it's trite to say it's her turn, but
right.
appreciate that Chad Brown's in a unique position that he's got to get. He's got to get his clients. They've all got to get their moment, and they've got to add to their resumes. And not that Bill Lawrence, who actually won very nicely earlier with that George Abro runner at Kentucky Downs at a nice price too, 7-1. In fact, the horse that Kate and Bradar delivered to everybody on a plate. And not that Seth Klarman and Bill Lawrence don't get their share of wins, but let's be honest, this filly does need a graded stake win to enhance her value when the time comes to put her into a November sale. And I have a hard time seeing her get beat.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it's a great race because we all agree that New Money Honey is a C, and especially for exotics, Dan will use Bletchley, I'll use Starship Jubilee, and we'll play around with exactas and tries. And so you get the 2-1, the 9-5, but you also get the 8-1, the 10-1, in Jan's case, the 20-1, or Hallierbell even, and leave New Money Honey off those tickets. It's a great way to play the race. I'm certainly going to leave her off the pick 4s and let her beat me.
Before we go to the second half of the stake sequence, reminder, if you write to statsfeedback@equibase.com, when you try Stats Racelands, we're going to slap an extra month onto your trial. And do that tonight or do it by midnight tomorrow. And, of course, we're all going to be together again coming up in 3 weeks, looking ahead to Fall Stars Saturday at Keeneland and Jockey Club Gold Cup Day at Belmont. Breeders' Cup fields will really be taking shape starting actually this weekend. We've got 10 win-in-your-ins around the country. And in fact, tomorrow at the Irish Champions Day, you've got Leopardstown. You've got, I think, 3 tomorrow morning. So be aware that the action starts early tomorrow into the weekend. Let's go to the Bold Venture, and this may be a spot, Dan, you're going to kick it off. This may be a spot where Pink Lloyd, if you're going to tiptoe through with a horse like Inflexibility, maybe add a couple of names to your play here, because if Pink Lloyd were to get beat, you've got to think that would really boost the pick 4.
Yeah, I totally agree there. I mean, I did go with Pink Lloyd on top, but you could certainly see a scenario where he gets beat, and we can actually kind of look at what that scenario might ultimately appear like. But it is pretty remarkable. We've talked about, on Stats Raceland, it's pretty easy to kind of identify which horses sort of find trouble in races or have bad luck. Those red trouble indicators show you previous races in which a horse might have had trouble. And for an average horse, you might see it once every 3 or 4 or 5 races. For Pink Lloyd, that's 4 races in a row where he really just struggles getting out of the gate, which is not good considering that he's a horse that generally likes to be on or very near the lead. And so, you see all those ones, you see all those victories that he strung together, and the one loss, which I think we should just take a look at, the race 3 back there, where he's beaten by Kingsport at a huge price. A couple of the runners that are in here were in that race. And it's important to notice just really kind of what happened there. And, you could start envisioning a scenario where, hey, if that happens here, yeah, he's the 5 horse. You're going to see him kind of rear up as the gates open. It's maybe a little hard to catch there, but you can see Boreal Spirit is a horse who's going to come and press, but he's just being sent. So Pink Lloyd is going, and Boreal Spirit to his outside is going to just keep the pressure on. And when you see the numbers go up, the splits there, they're pretty fast. And heads up, Pink Lloyd is better than any individual horse in this race or in the race on Saturday. But if he doesn't get out of the gate and he has another horse or multiple horses pressing him through, a quarter and 22 and 2, and I believe that the second split there is 44 and 4, if I remember correctly. There it is. You could see here that he's going to now show his class and kind of pull away from Boreal Spirit. He's also going to hold off Jack's Escarpment on the outside, who looks like he's going by here. But the one that he can't hold off ultimately is Kingsport, who's going to kind of who's flying there, is just going to kind of find the seam there and just go right by. So look, that's the scenario. Could that happen here? Certainly. You have, as I mentioned, you have some of the horses from that race returning, and I think there's a decent amount of speed. So if he doesn't get out cleanly, he may face some pressure. But credit to this horse, because he's really, as you see there, he's the 16 wins from the 19 tries, almost $1 million there. He doesn't always make it easy on himself, but he's still found a way to win. So we'll see what happens. He's come back to win twice at 6 furlongs, and now he's back to the 6.5 furlongs here in the Bold Venture. So it really was that last 16th there that where he was caught, and so that's another thing to consider. He kind of is still, if you want to look at that streak, is still perfect at 6 furlongs. 6.5 was when he lost, when everything sort of went against him. If I'm going to take a chance with one at a price, the horse on the outside looked a bit interesting to me. Sweet Little Man. Trainer numbers are pretty solid. Jim Ensom having a nice meet, having a nice, really just going well in general at Woodbine. But this horse, Sweet Little Man, held his own in his first stakes last out, and the Play the King, that 3rd place finish, is even better than I think it looks on paper. We actually kind of had a brief view of him when we watched the replay earlier. But yeah, he didn't run too. He ran all right last out. It's hard to know if that race over a yielding turf matches up with these going 6.5 on synthetic, but he's been trending in the right direction. I think he looks just sneaky enough to throw him in the mix. Going to take a shot with him because of pace dynamics. Really, I think it could make things difficult for a number of these. I think the pace is going to be hot again, and this looks like a horse at least who'll be coming from mid-pack to even further back. And so I think he's got the right running style. And if he, can take another step forward here in this kind of company, he could be dangerous. And I think he's going to probably get overlooked. He's 8-1 morning line. I wouldn't be surprised if he got 10-1 or so on him. I certainly don't think his price is going to come down significantly. And the other one that I thought was interesting was Icarin Road. Ran one of his best career races here last year when he won this race. He saved ground behind Boreal Spirit in that race. Back then, though, he was consistently posting numbers. You could see there the 107s, the career best numbers that are highlighted in green. Even that the low number sandwiched in there is 104. And then you look at the most recent 4 races this year, topping out in the high 90s with a couple of 70s and 80s in there. So, he might have lost a step. He might be a step slower than he was back then. But he's another one who should be able to kind of have a nice ground-saving trip. And if the pace is hot enough, he could potentially make a move late and be a factor. So Just another sort of quirky stat. If you wanted to, Ellis, look at Battle in Seattle, I did a little trainer search on that one on Grand Motion, and so I guess I sort of automatically expect positive numbers in, in stakes races, especially when, like whenever I see Grand Motion, I just expect any search is going to yield something that's at 15% at least or higher. But the search that I did here was the past 5 years, turf to dirt. Excuse me, not turf to dirt, turf to all.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it on this one though, because I don't want to mess with people watching.
Okay,
it. It still gives you the idea. It's still a zero.
Yeah, totally. And I'll just, so you'll see 0 for 6 here, turf to dirt. I will let people know though that when you do the search for turf to all weather in all stakes races, there are 29 starters in the last 5 years, 0 for 29. And I think only a handful of them have even hit the board. So for whatever reason, this particular angle and this particular transition in stakes races, not the best angle for Grand Motion. So just something to think about if you're considering Battle in Seattle. So how about you, Ellis?
Well, I really like Kieran Road here, and the reason is twofold. Not only did he win the race last year, he was 5-1. And you can show when he gets into it, this goes back to the horse I was talking about a few races back, who I go back and remind myself, Starship Jubilee, I believe, who got back in the form. Kieran Road, maybe it was a change of jockey. I'm not sure. Santos rode the horse, tremendous there. The figures I'm not worried about because he can pop up. He went from 99 to 107 when he started his streak last year. But what's important to note is first of all, Kieran Road's about 107. And of course, Pink Lloyd, who's going to start to even money, which is kind of a joke because he's going to be 2 to 5. He's in the 104 to 1. Kieran Road last year's race is no slower than everything except Pink Floyd's Cartier. It's all about the same range. When Pink Lloyd got beat by Kingsport here, and I can look at the chart because I don't have it in the company line. When Pink Lloyd got beat by Kingsport, Pink Lloyd was carrying 124 and Kingsport is carrying 118. Now, I'm not a big weight guy, but it's significant enough here that I think that and the pace did him in a little bit. And now Kingsport is up to 122, and he certainly has a shot here. But here's the 122 where Pink Lloyd is at 125. And now today, Kieran Road gets the break. And he comes in at 118. He's getting the same 7 pounds from Pink Lloyd that Kingsport got when he beat him. He's last year's winner. He's on the same pattern. Last year he won a optional allowance claimer at Woodbine right before he won this race. Same exact race you can see here. He paired the number this year, not as much, but still he's going to get pace to run at. So I like Kieran Road. I don't think it'll be 15, but I'm really in love with the odds. I will use Pink Lloyd. I'm not going to toss him out like I am Oscar Performance in the last. I'm going to use Pink Lloyd in pick 3s and pick 4 tickets, and I'll use Kingsport as well because he proved it wasn't a fluke when he came back and he won the Elgin here, beat Melmich. Melmich is approaching $1 million in career earnings, so no knocks there. Kieran Road on top. Going to use Pink Lloyd and Kingsport and exactas and in pick 3s, pick 4s. Steve?
Well, you guys did a nice job covering this, and Kieran Road, a nice option at a price. Horse we didn't talk about is Loose on the Town, and I've been a fan of his a long time. The time he spent with Brian Lynch, Mike Doyle's got him, and Mike Doyle is very capable. His presence in here is just a little interesting as a horse that. That particularly with Castellano getting aboard, Castellano knows him. And I as an exotic candidate, Loose on the Town feels like a horse that you could feather in underneath and boost exotics. I mean, the more we discuss this race, the more it looks like, Pink Lloyd is just, it's going to be very, very tough to stop. The 6.5 furlongs is a little bit of an oddball distance, and it is interesting that in the long extended period Pink Lloyd's dominance the last few years, the 6.5 is his most recent beat, which came in the Shepherdson, and I just it's an in between distance, and I don't think that Yorkton on the lead can hold people off. He had trouble holding them off at 6. So 6.5 isn't gonna do him any favors. But Loose on the Town is going to get a very advantageous trip in here, and I thought that he was the right price if you want to have somebody underneath to put with a horse like Icarin Road and whoever else you fall on. Kingsport is a horse that'll be picking up pieces late as well. But this is obviously another Pink Lloyd spot, and Bob Tiller, one of the really fun horsemen around. He's had a couple of very nice horses come his way the last couple of years, and the way he's kept Pink Lloyd in form is really a tribute to him. 16 of 19. That's a scary percentage. Let's go to the fourth leg here, the Northern Dancer, and in a lot of ways, this may be the most interesting event of the sequence.
Well, this is definitely an interesting race, and I like it a lot on a lot of levels because you've got Hawkville, who I'll get to, the favorite, and certainly a $4 million horse that's only come in a few races. And I'm going to take a flyer here. Not a flyer. I like this horse. I'm going to start with English Illusion. Groban's at 15. I think it'll be higher. Gets a second leading jockey in Rafael Hernandez. And what I like is, first of all, this is a stayer. So he may not have done much. He's earned $250,000. He's got 4 wins, 2 wins on the grass, but he proved his staying ability winning the Halton last year pretty nicely. He beat Johnny Bear, who we'll get to in a minute. Well, actually, I'll mention Johnny Bear won the race last year beating Hawkville. So he beat last year's winner, who was in form. There was no excuse for Johnny Bear. It was 6.5 clear of the next. That was a mile and a half. And back here, he ran on the all-weather. He ran a mile and 5.8 and rallied from 7 back to get up by a neck. Hernandez rode for the first time last time out, and I like Rafael on the turf. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go show everybody. If you want to see a pretty incredible statistic, it's here in the summary. We'll look at the detail real quick. Rafael Hernandez in the last year in turf routes on the circuit, which is Woodbine. He's 26 for 120, 22% wins with a flat bet profit of 42% and an average immediate win price of $7.07. He is, in my mind, the best turf rider in a pretty good colony because you have Boulanger and Husbands and Contreras and De Silva. But Hernandez is really good. And so this is an interesting horse. Now, he got claimed, and get back to the 9, this is a horse that had won, actually 5th last year. Let's go back to his previous form. Well regarded at the start of his career, ran third in the Ontario Derby. There's another mile and a half win, a real stayer again, because he's English Channel. We kind of figured that. And then last year won second in the Hall behind Johnny Bear. Johnny Bear comes back to win this race. So he's on the same pattern Johnny Bear was last year. And got beat Hawkville, of course, and he runs 5th and doesn't run a lick. Comes back at that mile on 5.8, I said. Then he takes some time off here, January to June, 7th, 3rd. This is a great pattern. The speed figure pattern, the improvement pattern, he's really picking up for this race. And they dropped him in. He claimed for $25,000. Sylvia Tion, if I'm saying that correctly. Certainly I have to be corrected if I'm wrong. What's really interesting about this is, and I'm not going to go to the stat right now because we're running low on time and I don't want to have a problem. But I did the stat going to the trainer. The trainer itself was 4 for 6 with jockey. That's the last year. But it's better than that. The last 2 years at Woodbine, Tion has won 15 races, and 6 of those are with Hernandez, and almost all of them were prices. I'm not saying anything's untoward. It's just a matter, she gives Rafael live horses. And this 106 figure from this mile and 5/8 is on par. It's the 3rd best Equibase speed figure in the field. So you got a horse in form a true stayer who likes turf with a jockey trainer that can't be beat that I think could do a lot of damage here. The other one's Paris and Cross, who I really did like last week, scratched out of the Kentucky Turf Cup. And I'm going to show you the John's Call for those who didn't see it. That was a mile 5/8 on the grass against some really nice horses. And I'm going to go to the last 16th. I'm sure Steve remembers it because he was there. If a horse was ever impeded and lost any chance at winning a race, this was what happened to Paris and Cross. We're going to see it here. I've got to remember the 3. He's in the carp red and orange, and he's going to be behind horses here. I believe, I missed the accident. No, there it is, right there. And he just gets shut, just slammed the door, and I think he might have won the race. It was a really bad incident. He's run the 2 best races of his career, 121 and 118 figures, and we know he can get it. And Rosario rides it. He's going to ride him. They rode him here. So Paris and Cross is my second contender. And then Hawkbill, I'll use him. I'm not going to leave him out completely, but, he got beat last year at 3-5. I don't see any excuse for that. He's running against some of the best in the world. Rolling Lion came back to win. Poets World, Cracksman. But he's a little suspect. I mean, he might want to go to the lead. I don't know if that's going to be the right tactic. So I'm going to use him. But I definitely like English Solution here. I'm absolutely betting him to win in place. I'm betting Paris and Cross over to 10-1 to win in place. I'm going to really hammer those two and try and mess around with some exactas. Hopefully, the last leg of the pick 4, which I will include Hawkbill because I have the price in other races as well. But those are my picks, 9, 10, 5 in the Northern Answer.
I like it. I'm going to go with the horse on the rail, Mektal. This is a horse who has not run much. In fact, was off for about 10 months before coming back in the Nijinsky and running an incredible race because, as you mentioned, we're running short on time. I'll just kind of summarize that race, and if you get a chance, go back and watch the replay. Again, you could see the fractions there. You can see the splits, 51 and 4, 117. They were going extremely slow on the front end, and Mektal was, sort of way out of it. As they, sort of turned for home, everyone was sort of running in position, and Mektal was the only horse who closed within a half a length. Really, really impressive effort off a 10-month break, and now he's had a couple more months off. And so, assuming that Graham has him, sort of the right way, and looking at just sort of the back class and what he could do on his best day, and also considering that Utmost is also entered in this race promotion to ensure that the pace is a bit more honest than the Nijinsky. I think Mektal, for me, if I have one confident play on Saturday, it's Mektal. I think he could be sort of cranked up for a huge effort. Jose Ortiz also riding here, so that would be my strong sort of top choice. Johnny Bear, you mentioned in passing, the 4-horse. Johnny Bear strung together 2 nice starts back to back, including a 3rd place finish in the Nijinsky behind Tizaslam and Mektal. The race to look at, though, again, if you get a chance, note the trouble indicator there. Last out in the Halton. That race was really interesting. Turning for home, he gets boxed in. Then when he gets clear running late, he kind of, accelerates. He looks like he's about to go past English Illusion, but then that one comes out on him a little bit to try to intimidate. And instead of just sort of drifting out a little bit farther and just kind of continuing to ride, Luis Contreras pretty much pulls up. And again, I mean, look, it's easier for me to say as someone who wasn't riding, but he takes up twice, hoping for a DQ that never came. And so it was one of those where, you've seen the race a million times, or a race like it. It's one of those where if he continues riding, he probably wins, but he takes up and, figures that the move, the sort of the lugging out is significant enough that it's going to result in a DQ. So he just kind of stopped riding. So anyhow, I thought that was a very interesting race to watch, needless to say. And I think that this race could set up nicely for him. He kind of seems to find trouble occasionally, and if he can get things his way, I think he's going to run a big race. Hawkbill is the other one that's sort of logical to me. You mentioned Hawkbill near wired this field last year. This year, we'll have to contend with a few others who prefer racing on or near the lead. Again, I don't expect the pace to be lightning fast, but there will be others up there with him. On his best day, I think he should be able to handle these. It's all about him being able to settle in, find a trip, and kick late. And so he's one that I think you absolutely have to use. And like I said, if I were to single here or to go short, Mectal is one that just kind of jumps off the page for me, and that would be my pick here.
Well, Mectal, given that Alan Garcia stays with Utmost, Jose Ortiz gets Mectal, and that really should suit. The only reason that Mectal didn't beat Tizaslam in the Jinski was the poor start, and Jose Ortiz will most likely get Mectal out of the gate a little bit, a little more alacrity, and he should enjoy a terrific inside-out trip, and I cannot disagree. 7-2 would be very attractive because Hawkbill is going to be favored. You got to respect Hawkbill, one of the great international globetrotter types. And interestingly, as you mentioned, went to the lead last year, which don't think you'll see from him here. There's plenty of speed in this race, and he should sit a good trip behind the leaders. I'll take one from each column: Hawkbill, Mectal, and Patterson Cross as well, who is a horse. The one thing I'll say regarding him, Ellis, he's one of those horses that it seems to find trouble, or trouble finds him. And it's an unusual phenomenon when people, when trip handicappers, and there's nothing wrong with capping off of trips, but I do watch sometimes and see trip handicappers go back and beat their head against the wall with horses that invariably find themselves with too many to pass. And not that Rosario can't do that, and certainly a place like Woodbine suits Rosario's style, which is to maybe lose a little bit of ground on occasion and make sure he gets a clear running lane. And so a big sweeping turf course like Woodbine will absolutely suit Patterson Cross. So I absolutely like the idea. So 1, 5, and 10 make a lot of sense in here. The last leg of a terrific all-stakes pick 4 at Woodbine. That pulls us together, and appreciate everybody joining us tonight. And again, a reminder that the offer is an extra free month with any trial of Stats Raceland. You can just jot an email to statsfeedback@equibase.com. This is for first-time customers, and you'll get a free month. And then, of course, as we mentioned, look ahead 3 weeks. We'll be together on October 4th, and we're going to look at Fall Stars weekend, and this is when we really lean on Ellis. Keeneland comes home to Keeneland, and at Belmont, Super Saturday, the first of 2. And we want everybody to make sure you're following the new Stats Raceland Twitter account, Stats_Raceland. You can contact any of us with any questions, any problems, any ideas that you've got. Sign up for the weekly email that and daily. You get the angles that come to you right to your mailbox. The newsletter as well, and don't forget to, Ellis, show everybody the icon if they need any help in the forum.
Yep, the Stats Racelands forum is a good way to communicate with other Stats Racelands users and us as well. And it is up here, and that is the communications about us. And this one here is the icon. This is for sending email, and this one is for, this takes you to the subscriber forum.
want to wish everybody the best of luck the weekend and leading up into the fall. Best time to be using Stats Raceland. We've got really a lot of excitement building toward Breeders' Cup, and we hope you'll come along with us. We'll see you in 3 weeks. Good luck this weekend.